Hey everyone, welcome back to the Faith at Work podcast, where we talk about what it means for our faith to inform our everyday work. This season, we're talking about the hard realities about work and how we can turn to Jesus to bring healing and transformation into our lives. Stress at work is usually not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So what do you do when you get stressed at work? I think many of us, if we're honest, probably find ourselves complaining, whether it's through a bit of sarcasm or just venting to another coworker. As humans, complaining tends to be our default setting, and it's easy to resort to that when we face extra pressure at work. So today we're going to talk about how we can be people who instead practice gratitude in the midst of difficult and challenging situations at work. We're also going to be hosting a question and response episode later this season, so we'd like for you to share any difficult situation that you've encountered at work and a question that you have about navigating it. So to submit your situation and question, you can email us at faithatwork@ccclife.org. All the situations shared on the podcast are going to remain anonymous. Thank you so much for joining us today. Here we go. Larry, Megan, hello.
Hey, Daniel.
How are you doing? Hello. This is now the 5th episode of the Faith at Work podcast for the 3rd season. We're rolling. Yeah. We have been talking about the heart and the way that our brokenness impacts not only us, but also the other people in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And we've been trying to understand that through situations. And today we're going to be talking about a situation with an ER nurse who is facing a lot of stress and pressure and then tends to deal with that in an unhealthy way through complaining. And so we're gonna be talking about that today. And actually, this was the same scenario that we just talked about in our last Faith at Work Conversations event. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you were not able to make it, if you were not able to come for whatever reason, this is a good way to kind of at least get a sense for some of the things and some of the ideas and themes that we were talking about ourselves during that event.
So I have our trivia question here.
Oh, good.
For today. Since we're talking about an ER nurse, the question is, if you could shadow any medical professional for a day, who would that be and why?
Yeah.
Got it locked in?
I got it locked in. Okay. If I could shadow anyone, I would want to shadow a dentist. Well, it's actually specifically an orthodontist. Because I know, right? Larry's laughing at me. Okay, that's fine.
Just learn something new about you every week.
Every week. Because I had braces when I was younger and they really impacted my life. Like it really changed. It changes your smile, obviously, but I don't know. I think it kind of sets people free to smile in ways that maybe they wouldn't. Because I have friends of mine that they never got braces, and so they'll smile now in a camera, but keep the mouth shut. And they won't really laugh, and they're afraid of laughing. They're afraid of people looking at their teeth. I'm like, Wow. So I just think it's a really beautiful.
So you had a positive experience with an orthodontist.
I definitely had a positive experience.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know people don't always have positive experiences, but mine was positive. So
that's cool.
I'll do it.
Cool.
Yeah,
that is cool. Yeah, your orthodontists help you smile again.
They work a lot with students and young adults, and I love working with students and young adults. So, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, I would shadow my sister in particular.
No, you'd be a very specific medical professional.
There is somebody that I want to shadow. It would be my sister. She is works in the cardiac ICU at a major hospital around here. And it's so funny because I could never imagine myself being in the medical field ever. Mm-hmm. That was one thing. I was I didn't always know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I did not want to be anything medical. I just couldn't do it. I get very queasy. I can't watch any medical shows.
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy, not for me. Whatever it is.
We've now learned something new about Daniel.
No, I just can't do it. But my sister, on the other hand, is she's like, Daniel, I just squeezed someone's heart alive the other day. She's telling me all of these things, and she
But you'd want to shadow her?
Absolutely.
You'd be out in 5 seconds. It's hey, Daniel.
Yeah, you're so right. But I just honestly, I'm just amazed at how we grew up in the same family, because I'm we are such different people
on that front.
Yeah. And she's also a very she's a pretty laid back personality. So for someone like her to be in such an intense environment and situation, I'm just curious. I just want to know what she's like.
So it's not really to watch what she's doing. It's to watch her.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's
true. I get it.
That's true.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a both and.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think I would shadow the team physician for the LA Lakers.
You also have someone very specific.
Of course, it's sports related.
Yeah,
I mean,
What about the Ohio State Buckeyes?
Okay, that'd be a good one too.
Yeah.
And it's not because you're watching what they're doing. I mean, they're, but elite athletes and what they do with their bodies is unbelievable.
It's
how
insane.
they are in the shape that they do. But so it's mostly because you'd be hanging out with, Luka and LeBron and the crew or any of the Buckeyes. Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
That's awesome.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's read our scenario for today. We'll jump right in. All right. So Emily is a nurse at a busy hospital. She's highly skilled and experienced, but has been feeling increasingly overwhelmed by her workload, especially since her unit has been short-staffed. Additionally, the hospital has been pushing for more efficiency, which means that nurses are expected to handle more patients and administrative duties, leaving them with less time for direct patient care. Emily doesn't want to confront her supervisor, Karen, about the additional responsibilities because she doesn't want to seem like she can't handle the job. Instead, she decides to start taking a different approach. During shift handovers, when Karen asks Emily how things are going, Emily responds with, "Oh, just another day of doing everything I can to keep this place running smoothly," with a hint of sarcasm. Emily doesn't directly bring up the fact that she's overwhelmed, but her tone and subtle comments hint at her growing frustration. Karen can tell something is off, but she's not exactly sure how to respond to her slightly sarcastic comments. When colleagues ask her to help with extra tasks, she does so reluctantly, usually with a subtle sigh, and then says something like, "I don't know what this place would do without me," even if the task wasn't significant. Emily continues to make others feel like she's bending over backwards for them. Most of her colleagues are not as experienced as her, so they don't say anything directly to her about her comments. Emily feels a growing resentment and frustration in her. She feels like she's getting taken advantage of, and with having so many additional responsibilities without any additional recognition or compensation. Emily knows that she should be thankful to God in all circumstances, but honestly, gratitude is the last thing she wants to think about. And that's that, my friends.
Very real situation.
Very real.
Yeah. So what might be going on in her heart? What might be the situation here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot. I feel like first just acknowledging the difficult reality of that moment when, especially like in a setting, in a hospital setting like this, right? And you're getting additional responsibilities poured onto you with not more resources, or maybe you don't feel like you have the resources that you need. That can be a very frustrating situation to be in, because you feel like more and more is being asked of you. And I'm sure a lot of medical professionals probably especially felt this during COVID, right? Like I
cannot imagine.
There's so many things that are being asked of you, and you are you're a limited human being with so much time and space. And usually people who are in that profession genuinely are in that profession to help other people, right? And so it's got to be really frustrating when you feel like you're not able to provide the care probably that you really want to provide your patients that you have. And like that's really what you want to do, but you don't feel like you're able to do that because of all this additional responsibility. So I feel like it's just helpful at least maybe starting there and naming that of like this is a very real frustration I think that a lot of people probably encounter and experience.
Yeah, and if she's good at her job, all the more responsibility is being piled on, which is fine. But like it says in the scenario, there's not necessarily understanding, compensation, greater time off because you've put more time in. And so, as you said, there's almost this justice conversation of it doesn't really feel fair, right? Like I think there's some of that going on here before we start unpacking, well, now how do we handle that? It really is getting a clear picture of reality for Emily.
Yeah.
And it sounds like she's more experienced than some of her peers, which would indicate that she's probably been in the job for a while and probably long enough to maybe remember it wasn't like this 10 years ago. Or, I think if you're in healthcare, it's been a constant, do more with less, and that sort of expectation. But so she's got maybe that memory of, I used to be able to provide better care than I can right now. And that is very frustrating. Whatever the reasons, and that's probably a primary reason, it's leaking out
right
in her heart and in her words, and she's recognizing it.
Yeah.
Admitting that I'm saying these things and I'm coming across this way, and it's not good.
Yeah, and you can tell that she doesn't, like, it's not really her, right? Like, she's like, I don't really know what to say or what to do, and so instead, I do this instead. I don't really want to be this person that's sarcastic. I don't want to be this person that acts like I'm the martyr for all, right? But there's not an alternative right now, and so I think that's part of our conversation today is saying, okay, well, what is the alternative? What else? What other ways can we navigate this? But also, what is it really wanting? Like, what do you want to change in this space and place? And instead of going around it, like just head on, like face it head on, like address it directly instead of hoping someone's going to get it when I'm subtly hinting at hoping you can mind read what I'm thinking and feeling. Yeah. When their reality is if we're in this situation, everybody is probably handling more than their load initially to some degree.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think it's worth stopping there with what you just said. What is it that I want? You know, it reminds me of when Jesus, you know, said that to the blind man, you know, what do you want?
What do you want?
And the person was faced with, when you're really faced with that question, sometimes it's easy for us to just go through, be frustrated, say these things, do these things, but we never actually sit back and say, if I could change the scenario, what is it that I want? Right. And maybe given the parameters that I have, i.e., they're not going to add 3 nurses to our shift.
Yeah, that's not going to
happen. I know
happen.
that's not going to happen. So what is it that I want? I think that's a great question for her to ask, and then it helps her articulate if she gets to that place of talking to her supervisor, what is it that she...
Well, and that'll potentially lower frustration as well, because then I have a target. And kind of like, well, in counseling, one of the things we do is we do a treatment plan, right? And so why do we do a treatment plan? I call it the game plan. Larry, you'll appreciate that sports analogy.
Yeah,
you're welcome. But I call it that, but it's because it's like, hey, this is how we're going to play this game of life. Like, this is what we're going to do. What's our plan? And so in that plan, we have to have goals so that then we can create objectives, which are basically the little steps you've got to take to meet the main goal of why you're here, so that we have measurable outcomes to know, like, okay, this is actually working and this is actually benefiting your life. Otherwise, it's just frustration. It's just, oh, well, things just aren't better. Well, that's really vague. What does that mean? I'm just overwhelmed. Well, yeah, but like, what does that actually mean? Can you articulate the specifics of what it would mean to not be overwhelmed? What it would mean to feel supported, what it would mean to feel heard. And it might not actually be that much change that needs to happen, but because it's not been articulated, it's more of this like nebulous out there carrot on the stick that we're not ever really going to get because I've never been able to identify it. And so it is getting very specific and being able to do that. So then, as we'll talk about, some things need to change, perhaps like boundaries and gratitude and those kinds of conversations. But it's almost like we can't even start with that stuff until we know, well, what is it you want?
Yeah. I think naming that is so important and so critical, because it actually points to the very thing that it might point to the deeper thing of what actually is going on in her heart. Because if the thing that she really wants is recognition, right? That might be a different issue than, you know, I just feel like I'm
great point.
Unfairly paid, right? Like there's a different conversation there that you can have, kind of depending on what she's looking for. And it sounds like maybe it could be like a combination of some of these things, right?
Yeah.
But even just naming, this is the thing that I'm really after, right? Or maybe it's the fact that she is frustrated by the injustice of kind of the system that she's operating in and feels powerless to change it, right? It could be any number of those things, but naming that I think is really critical, rather than just kind of leaking it out in these sort of unhealthy ways and hope, you know, then her coworkers are like, I don't know how to help her. I don't know
how to approach
what to do with
to
something
begin
like this, right?
this conversation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Another thing I think is always a good question to ask is there anything here that's not true? Like, am I believing anything that's not true? And it could be just because it's in the culture and we all believe it, but it's really, when we think about it, it's maybe not true. Or it could be like a spiritual thing where, you know, Satan's kind of coming in, telling her, you know, you work way harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
You should be getting recognized more than everybody else, or things that, so again, to step back and ask yourself that question, am I believing anything that's untrue here? And if you analyze that and say, yeah, there's a couple things that probably aren't true.
Yeah.
You know, again, maybe I'm working harder, or administration in this place doesn't care about people at all. Is that really true? Or maybe it is. But analyzing those questions and asking that along with what is it that I really want helps you kind of look at the scenario, again, stepping out of your own scenario and viewing it and saying, okay, if I was, again, we've talked about this before, if I was my supervisor, what would I want from me?
Okay, so let's talk about then the gospel piece to this. So what does Jesus teach us about dealing with difficult situations when we're faced with difficult situations like this, and how we should respond in that sort of way, and kind of naming those realities?
I think Larry makes a good point with the question of what do you want? knowing that that is something Jesus asked others, right? And so us asking ourselves and then bringing that to Jesus, not as like this genie in a lamp, okay? But it's this, are you inviting him into what you see as unjust or unfair or not helpful or not healthy? Are you going to invite him into that? And how to do that, right? I mean, we read in 1 Peter, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And so again, what is that anxiety? I think some of it starts there. And then, of course, then in Philippians, it's like you present your petitions to God with thanksgiving, right? We do this. And I think we can unpack this a bit more in a moment. But it does begin with, okay, the gospel says Jesus cares about the details. And so what are those? And can you bring those to the surface and then bring those to him in prayer? And I would even think, because it's so emotionally charged to some degree sounding, in prayer, in community, I think is really important here. Bringing others into this conversation to pray alongside and with you. I think of when Nehemiah went to rebuild the wall and he saw the destruction, he saw the things that were wrong and broken. The very first move that he did after getting favor to go do this was to find other men who feared the Lord to pray for him. Mm-hmm. Like find other people that are believers that fear the Lord, that love Jesus and that will pray alongside you as well. I think it's a crucial step in all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, it might even be worthwhile just reading the passage that you were referencing, the Philippians passage. Yeah, maybe we can read that. So this is Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 4. It says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you."
Yeah, those are super pertinent to this situation.
Yeah. One of the things that immediately kind of stands out to me is this idea, when he says, in every situation by prayer and petition, that's kind of expected, like coming to God with those things. And then he adds that little turn, like with thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. Like he adds that little phrase right there, which I think is maybe worth even talking about a little bit, because it's like, there's this sense in which we can present the difficult realities that we are facing, that we encounter, these things before God, and he sees those things and he cares about those things, very much so. But also with this idea of gratitude before, bringing those things with thanksgiving before God is important. And maybe it's even just that sense of recognizing that God does see this situation and he cares about that situation, and so I can bring that before him.
Wait, and the really cool thing about gratitude, there's lots of wonderful things about gratitude and what it does for us as human beings. But one of the really unique things that it does is it actually allows our brain to become more creative. Some of the most creative people are some of the most grateful and gratitude practicing people. The more we practice gratitude, it actually opens our mind up, our brain up to the ability to think creatively beyond just this temporal right here, right now, this is all that I've got mentality. And that's a gift of God that he's created us, that our brain would respond to the practice of gratitude by becoming more creative.
Yeah, right.
And in this situation that Emily's facing, creativity in terms of, okay, this is what I see is wrong. I want to present this to God. And then that act of thankfulness to God as well is also helping her literal physical body mentally get to that space that can also begin thinking beyond just what I do not like, just what is messed up right now, just what isn't fair right now.
Yeah.
It opens her up as well to being able to, again, maybe creatively think about other ways of approaching or handling this, ways that she hasn't thought yet, ways that maybe can help get unstuck in some of this.
Yeah. It reminds me of what you were saying, I think maybe an episode or two ago, when you talked about this idea of perception is reality. So gratitude is helping us reframe what our perception is, and that changes, I think our reality. And I don't know if that's kind of...
No, totally. And with Emily right now, I mean, where she's at, you can tell she just feels stuck. she feels stuck. Like she feels like this is all there is. This is all I've got. I've got to try to subtly get you to pay attention to me through my sarcasm because I can't in any other way. So that kind of language around it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's forming then that reality, whether it needs to be that or not. And God has given us in all of his beautiful creativity other ways to begin to approach this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And for her to literally step back and like looking at these verses and just say, I'm just going to take a minute and say, what is it with Thanksgiving?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean right now? What in this circumstance would I be thankful for? I mean, you know,
and sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it might take a minute. Okay, let's be real.
The ability to work. I mean, her physical ability to work.
Yeah,
a job. You know, coworkers, the healthcare system. I mean, the ability to have a part in. And I don't want, by saying these things, I'm not, putting a guilt trip on her. I mean, we're all in those circumstances, but it makes sense for us to step back and literally go through a list of what is it that I have to be thankful for, because it can, as you said, reframe our perspective on this thing. Yeah. There's another thing too, and maybe it's shifting it a little bit, but that responsibility that she has, it says that she wasn't comfortable talking to her supervisor because she didn't want to be viewed as, I can't handle the job. Either she can't, or maybe she's not getting the things done that she needs to get done, or it's a recognition thing where it's like, I'm getting it done, but I'm not getting recognized for it. And so that's kind of a different issue. But I think we would all agree there's a responsibility that she has to be honest with her supervisor, and that she's even saying herself, I know the way that I'm coming across isn't right. Let's all agree. Yep, it's not.
It's not.
Passive aggressiveness and sarcasm and sniping.
Yeah.
And putting yourself, that's not right. So we all agree on that. Yeah. So what do you do? And for her to settle back in and say, I do have a responsibility to be honest with my supervisor. If you, going back to that question, what would your supervisor want in this situation? I would think they'd want to have honest feedback rather than this tension or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry if I shifted the conversation.
No, I think that makes complete sense. I think there's sort of this interesting, or I guess maybe one question that you could ask, I would ask her too, is like, it maybe sounds like a very cheesy question to ask, but have you spent time praying about this situation? Have you actually spent time? Because oftentimes when we find ourselves complaining, I think we haven't actually first presented it to God, of like actually bringing it to him. But there's that paradox of like, what I'm hearing is like this paradox of lament of like, maybe there's injustice or things that aren't right? But holding on to that, but then also holding on to this idea, but God is still good and faithful and he's true. Mm-hmm. And so there's the Thanksgiving piece that I can somehow still practice gratitude in some sort of way and lament at the same time without saying, my gratitude isn't negating all of the bad things that are happening. And I think oftentimes we think that I can't be grateful because all of these bad things are happening, but I think there's this call potentially for us to embrace both of those realities in a situation maybe like that she's.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Paul is saying in these verses, right? It's that by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, but you don't pray and petition God when life is going peachy. You know what I mean? Like, this is keeping your foot in reality and recognizing this isn't okay. I'm not great with the way things are right now. And being honest. You said that already, Daniel, the word honesty. And I think that's such a crucial thing. Too often we kind of view prayer as the place to be pretty and perfect. Prayer isn't where we're supposed to be perfect. Prayer is where we're supposed to be honest. Mm-hmm. And inviting Jesus into that and letting him know us as we learn him, so that then we could mirror what Jesus did, which was, he says multiple times throughout the Gospels, I'm not doing anything that the Father hasn't told me to do. I'm not saying anything that the Father hasn't told me to say, which means he's in communion with the Father, which means he's speaking with him. Mm-hmm. And we see it often as well. He goes away and he prays by himself, right? There are things Jesus needed to pray about. So all the more we do too. But I can't believe for a minute he wasn't raw and honest before his heavenly Father about what was going on. You know that he was.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was what our model did, then we too, again, not where we need to be perfect, but where we need to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so keep foot in reality. And we can be both things. Like, you can be grateful. There's still things to be grateful for, even in the middle of chaos, because there's a lot of chaos is going on around this lady.
Yeah.
And we might have gotten away a little bit from your original question of, like, where's the gospel in this? Or, how does the gospel apply? I mean, Paul's words obviously do that, but like that sense of, the gospel, that the sense of something has been paid for that we couldn't in and of ourselves do. And the good news is that Jesus came and did that for us, and so how does that apply in this circumstance, because there's a certain bit of overwhelm here on her part that and that's, the 1 Peter passage, cast your care on me. That's what the gospel is. There's a Savior there that has said, I can handle this. And the question that she faces, that we all face in those kind of circumstances, am I doing that? Am I casting on the Lamb who, paid for my sins and gives me new life and all of those kinds of things that she can just go, you have.
Yeah. Well, and right before in Philippians, right? I think it's chapter 2, it's where we read of the suffering servant. And this is who Jesus was and became for us. He took on our flesh and became nothing so that, we could know the great love of God and the sacrifice that Jesus gave us so that we could come into his saving, redemptive purposes and plans for our lives. What a beautiful reality. And then on the heels of that is this verse 4 from Philippians 4, and let your gentleness be evident all. The Lord is near. The same God that gave all for you, he's right there with you in this. Don't discount that fact, right? Don't take that one out of the equation. Let's remember you're not walking into that space alone.
Yeah. It's really good.
And again, that doesn't real quick, that doesn't take away the potential injustice, though, right? Of the challenge that she's facing with being ladled and not given opportunity to have more space or breath or finances or recognition or whatever. And I think we need to see that. I don't think that's just us being thankful in the middle of struggle doesn't mean we accept being a doormat. I think that needs to be clear. That's not healthy either, nor is that what we see mirrored in Scripture necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not turning a blind eye to what the reality is being faced. Yeah. And I think that actually tying that in nicely into the response or practice, because really the response that we've been talking about is how do we actually lament a situation or deal with the hard realities that we're facing, but then also practice gratitude in the midst of that. How do we hold those two things kind of in tension? So what's a practice maybe that Emily could engage in to help her to have that kind of response?
I think one of the practices, we've been talking about it, but I think is to look at the life of Christ. And we're reading now about what happened as he was on his way to the cross. And, we see what Paul says about him, about, being emptied out. And he, above anyone who should have been revered, wasn't.
Right.
When he went to the cross, he was falsely accused. He was spat on, hit, his followers, said, I'll never leave you. You go, yeah, you will. And they go, no, we won't. And you go, yeah, they did. So he was betrayed. All of those things that he didn't deserve any of, many of which we actually do deserve. So looking to him as an example, not to make her feel overwhelmed or but just to say, I'm not the only one who has maybe been unjustly treated, and what's my role model for responding? And I think we're told, he is our role model for responding, and also gives us the power to do that, not just buck it up and just take it, but the grace that he provides us is one thing. I think that's one avenue. There's other avenues, obviously.
And the injustice that Jesus experienced, it wasn't because of the simple, it's just the cultural norm and it's just how things roll, like that mentality. It was because Jesus submitted himself to that willingly. Like he committed to the will of the Father and then allowed that to take place because he was in communion with his Father to know that this is the Father's will. It wasn't just because culture got the best of him or the people got the best of him and the people overpowered him and put him on that cross. He put himself there knowing this is the path to resurrection life. Like, this is the path to eternal life for all those, for God so loved the world that I came for, right? Like, so that was a willing submission. And so it wasn't injustice 100%, as in he did not deserve any of that. But even that was a decision because of his relationship with his Father that said and spoke this into his life, that said, this is the path. And so similar in some vein, we have to kind of choose that as well. But part of that, again, it comes back to, are we having an active relationship with Jesus on a daily basis? Are we praying? Are we remembering the presence of the Holy Spirit? Are we reading what the Bible says about how to live in this life? Mm-hmm. And if so, then we'll know better now how to face the reality of the injustices in our world, because they are there. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily going to stop. It's been around forever, and it's going to be around forever. I mean, it doesn't mean we don't step into those spaces and fight for justice. Do not hear me say that, but it teaches us how. How do we now go about this so that it's not just, well, my will be done, or this just isn't fair, or I'm all alone in it and I'm just feeling beat up day in and day out and I don't know the meaning or the purpose behind this. Creates meaning, creates purpose, creates movement, where we might not be able to know the best next step on our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The thing that strikes me as you're talking there too is Jesus had he had an objective.
Yeah.
He knew why he was going to the cross. And so, again, it's quite a bit different. But does Emily know, like, what's my higher calling here? And if each one of us are living for a higher calling than it is what's on my agenda today, or even what my job is, or whatever, but I'm dealing on this level, mm-hmm. does it allow us to take on kind of what Jesus took on and his framework of, I'm willing to do these things because I have a higher calling here. Yeah. So in her job, maybe asking that question, is there something beyond just getting this job done that I'm here? Maybe it is to be an example of to her peers, caring for patients, whatever.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, and I think kind of a connecting piece to all of it, and Megan, you were mentioning this, is prayer for sure, right? Like centering yourself in that sort of way, and in order to even understand your calling, and even able to have a general sense of that, right? Mm-hmm. There's a sense of like I have to constantly be communicating with my Father and following the example of Jesus in that way. But I think one thing that I think could be helpful too is the book of Psalms is littered with prayer about hard realities, and then also, of victory and praise. And I feel like it holds that tension so well. And there are some Psalms where it's just Psalms of lament, right? Like these are really hard circumstances. And then you have Psalms that are, praising God. And then some of these are kind of in between, where it like starts with lament, but and ends in praise and remembers what God has been doing. So I think just on a very pragmatic level, I would encourage Emily to find one Psalm that holds this tension that you're facing and you're experiencing that resonates with you. And when you're in those moments of when you're, you feel like you need to present your petition, mm-hmm. so to speak, before God, the first thing you do is recite that psalm that you're, as a prayer before God, of saying, God, this is the reality that I face, and you know exactly what it is. And mm-hmm. I am powerless to really change that reality, so to speak, but I know that I can change my mindset if I focus my eyes and attention on you. Yeah. And I think that maybe could be a way of reorienting and reframing, thinking about that.
Just one last thing. Her responsibility or opportunity to speak into leadership on things that may not be right. Now, she's probably not going to change the healthcare system, probably not going to, add more staff to the thing to make everything easier. Mm-hmm. But honesty with your supervisor to say, here's what's happening, here's how I feel. And maybe it does come down to like recognition, like I don't feel recognized, I don't feel these things, but being honest, I think we have a responsibility as believers to do that. If injustice or things that aren't right happen and no one says anything, they continue to happen. But maybe you're the first person, or you're one voice in many that is a part of change actually transpiring in your workplace, which can be a really positive thing. So
it's really good. Just it's really good. Well, hopefully we can be those people that hold that tension really well. It's really tricky, but also really important.
Very important.
Thanks for joining us today on the Faith at Work podcast. If you're interested in learning more about our Faith at Work ministry, please visit ccclife.org/faith at work. And if you haven't already, be sure to like or subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening from and send it to a friend. See you next time.